for this symposium last year at our SPAGS board meeting as a way to facilitate student learning, and thought that it would be nice to have some assessment psychologists speak specifically about how to locate training in assessment psychology and how that's different from other areas of psychology. So we've got a very excellent panel of speakers, and we're excited to have them here. So each of our speakers is going to discuss specific areas of the internship and postdoc processes. So Dr. Archer is from Eastern Virginia Medical School, and he's a longtime internship training director, and he'll be speaking broadly about the internship application, interview, and selection process, and offering some pointers for those of you who are about to apply for internship. And Dr. Mark Blace from Massachusetts General Hospital is highly involved in the internship training program at the hospital and also has an assessment-focused postdoctoral fellowship. He'll be speaking about assessment training specific to an academic medical setting. And Dr. Nancy Kaiser-Boyd, excuse me, from the Geffen School of Medicine at the University of California at Los Angeles, will be speaking about internship and postdoctoral training issues and forensic mental health assessment. Dr. J.D. Smith is a postdoctoral fellow at the Child and Family Center of the University of Oregon, and he's going to be presenting information about how to find and secure postdoctoral position in your area of interest. So on behalf of the SPAGS Executive Board, we'd like to thank our speakers and all of you for coming today.
Good morning. I'm going to be talking primarily about internship positions this morning because that's what I know the best. Although I've been involved, I was involved for about 5 years in a postdoctoral fellowship in forensic psychology. So I know something about that area, but I have some less expertise in it. The question of applying to postdoctoral fellowships is also much more complex, I think, because each one is idiosyncratic. And I think it would be a fair statement to say that if you have applied to one internship position, you probably know a good deal about how to apply to all internship positions. If you've applied to one postdoctoral fellowship, you know how to apply to one postdoctoral fellowship. So my comments today will mostly be about internship training. I knew that. I've been an internship director for the past 25 years, and I've seen enormous changes over that period of time. Perhaps the most important and alarming of these changes over the past 10 years has been the increasing number of eligible intern applicants who have been turned away or have been unable to successfully match with APA-approved internship programs. Partial solutions and calls for voluntary restraint have been markedly ineffective in dealing with this issue. I now see intern applicants who greet the internship application process with the enthusiasm that a reasonable individual would have in confronting an angry bear. Given that about 1 out of 4 applicants will not place, who could blame them for being a little terrified in the internship application process? In fact, I believe that I am often seen just like this picture of a bear as I greet interns into our program and wish them a pleasant day interviewing at EVMS. Thank you. There's a parable relevant to internship application process that actually I'm stealing from Nick Cummings. But the story is, the parable is, that 2 campers are out in the woods and they're setting up a campsite. And as they set up the campsite, they become aware of the fact that there's a large, angry bear approaching the campsite. Both campers freeze for a moment, and one of them jumps into their bag pulls out a pair of running shoes, laces them up, and starts doing some stretches, loosening up. And the other camper says to them, "Are you crazy? There's no possible way that you can outrun a bear." To which the camper replies, "I don't need to outrun the bear, I just need to outrun you." That is, I believe, the basic message that all internship applicants should bear in mind. You don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun your competitors. That's the guiding principle of any reasonable advice to intern applicants now. So hopefully the information that you get today will be helpful to you in outrunning your competitors. I know that this can't possibly be as hard. Okay. If I can learn how to make the PowerPoint go forward, you can successfully place in an internship process. It's a given. This was a quote by the APEC director in 2011, which was the year in which we started for the first time the two-stage match process. And the APEC director is not given to editorial comments of any kind. It's always very cut and dry information. So it was very unusual for him to issue a statement at the end of that process last year that said, what a two-phase match cannot do, of course, is solve the growing imbalance between applicants and positions. No process can successfully place 4,200 applicants when there are less than 3,200 positions available. I have been in a unique position to witness the very real and very substantial human impact of an internship imbalance that has now spiraled out of control. So with that in mind, information is power, so I'll start by trying to provide you with some information about internship that was issued at the end of 2011. The average applicant in 2011 spent $1,700 submitting 15 applications to internship training sites, which included the cost of their transportation for interviews. Their mean debt load at the time that they applied was $77,917. More than a third of those applicants were over $100,000 in debt at the time that they applied for their internship training. 95% were from accredited APA programs. The average number of applicants from a program were 18.7, with over 20% of the applicants coming from programs that were placing over 30 applicants into the internship market. 8% of all applicants were participating in the match for the second time or more. Of the total applicants, 79% were women and 21% were men. The average applicant applied to 15 sites and received 6 invitations to interview, and we'll talk about that 6, the magic number 6, in more detail. The mean stipend paid by an internship was $23,700 for those who successfully matched. 24% of the applicants at the end of last year indicated that they were dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied with the match process. You can probably guess that given there were about 24% that didn't match, who those individuals were that were not pleased with the process. The average applicant had a median number of 539 hours of intervention experience and 152 hours of assessment experience at the time of their application. 75% of the applications came from individuals who had defended their dissertation proposal. 80% had completed by the time that they started their internship. The average applicant had 3 presentations on their application and no publications, either papers or book chapters. So now, don't you already feel a little faster? You look faster to me. Is the problem really that hard to understand? So I should, truth in advertising, tell you that my presentation is divided into 2 parts today, a rant and then some useful information for applicants. So first the rant part. Is it really that hard to understand what the problem is in terms of the match? I created this presentation prior to actual match day for 2012, but I predicted fearlessly that somewhere between 24% and 26% of all applicants would not match. I promised myself that if we were wrong and we did better than that, we would stop the presentation now and all go to a bar and celebrate the success of APA in dealing with this issue. But we're not going to the bar. because the rate of application that did not match was right in that range for this year. Perhaps you think, and I can see that some of you have a cynical side to you, perhaps you think I cheated in coming up with that estimate, so I'm now prepared for 2013 to make my prediction, write it down, put it in a sealed envelope. Now, are you ready? Okay. In 2013, the rate of interns who do not match will be between 26 and 29%. And by 2014, it is possible that as many as 1 out of 3 applicants will not match in the internship process, absent a decisive action by APA. Steve Smith assures me that APA is at any moment could leap into a decisive action for the first time in its organ. Perhaps before I finish this presentation, we'll have an announcement. For those of you who are statistically minded, see, that was a trick. It was a trick because you should be if you're a psychologist, you should be statistically minded. So you should have all said, well, I'm statistically minded. The trends are, I think, just kind of crystal clear. Both internship slots and applicants both have steadily increased in a predictable linear fashion over the past 11 years. The problem is that the rate of climb for applicants sharply exceeds the rate of climb for internship positions. There is a convenient line of argument that states that the problem is that internship positions have been decreasing, but that certainly doesn't look accurate given this data, which has been released by APEC. There is what I consider to be a strange argument that there really isn't a significant problem in the sense that psychology graduates are still finding jobs in psychology, and therefore we must not be producing too many psychology graduates. This observation, however, absent any documentation concerning job satisfaction, job reimbursement rate, or career development, is really meaningless. I'm feeling very confident now as I change the slides. I'm ready. This is the money slide, or if you prefer, it's the demoralization slide or the misery index slide. The bear is getting meaner and nastier with each passing year. Doesn't it look pretty clear to you that the bear would have eaten at least 1,000 applicants in 2012? Well, it actually ate 1,041 applicants at the end of phase 1. In 2010, Williamson at the University of Florida reviewed internship match data. He surveyed sites for the years 2000 through 2006, and he found that just 15 programs, which accounted for only 4% of overall graduate training programs, accounted for roughly 1/3 of all of the unmatched applicants in the APA pool. 14 of those 15 programs were PsyD programs, and all of them, it would be given, it's a given, were generating very large class sizes. They would have had to account for 1/3 of all applicants who didn't match. This slide is going to be somewhat difficult to read, but you really just need to see the bars. It's the data for 2006 through 2010. The first group on the left, multicolored, shows the number of applicants over the past 5 years in PhD programs. It has been decreasing. The next is from clinical PsyD programs, and it shows, because it's sloping to the right, as you can see, that there's been a steady increase over the same 5 years for PsyD programs. The last 3 groups, which are all show relatively flat growth, are from counseling programs, school programs, and combined programs. Now, it would be absurd to suggest that PsyD programs per se are responsible for the increasing disparity between applications and training positions. However, couldn't we identify a group of training programs that are responsible for a large part of this disparity? Should we ask them politely to volunteer to monitor the number of admissions for the good of the field of psychology, as we've been doing? Would it really violate the legal rights of these programs if APA took decisive action to curtail the programs based on training quality monitors, such as the number of interns, number of graduate students they placed in internship training programs, or just the amount of student debt that was present for many of these very large programs? It is my fear that APA would not have the courage to take any decisive action. And in the absence of that, it is most probable that what will happen is that the internship process will degenerate, I think, into a lot of people placed at non-APA sites, APA accreditation becoming relatively meaningless regarding internships, which, in my opinion, APA richly deserves and wouldn't cause me any loss of sleep. But I think it would damage students in the sense that internship training will degenerate into a kind of glorified practicum training. I fear that that's the solution because that's the de facto solution that will probably happen if no action is taken. And this is the data from 2002, including the 2012 match date that just happened a couple of weeks ago. The number of internship sites have increased roughly 15% over the last 10 years. The number of positions filled has increased 23%. However, the number of applicants have increased 44% over this period of time, so that the number of unmatched applicants, which this is two staggering pieces of information, I think, the number of unmatched applicants for this 10-year period has increased 141%. There is on the graduate student blog, one of the students did some quick math, and what they did is they took this year's number of total applicants, which was 4,435 prior to anyone withdrawing. They took the number of APA approved internship training slots, and they calculated that the chances of an applicant getting an APA approved training slot was 52% in the match. So, and the total number this year of unmatched applicants in any training slot, APA approved or not approved, was 25.9%. So that's the end of my rant. My goal was to first depress you and terrify you. I hope I've succeeded so that now I have your full attention. Okay, good. So now that I have your full attention, I have 10, not 9, not 11, but 10 pearls of wisdom which are guaranteed to result in a successful placement at an internship training slot of your choice. Should you use these 10 and you fail to place, SPA has generously, I think very generously, Radhika Krishnamurthy has offered to pay your entire graduate training expenses if you will just simply submit receipts to her. And you'll see her at the conference. You'll recognize her. Just save all your receipts from your graduate training, including rent, telephone, food, and give it to her, and SPA will pay you for that experience. Now, the other very important thing I need to tell you is I'm telling you the secrets, the 10 secrets today. Don't tell anyone else, because then they'll run as fast as you. So make up 10 really absurd things and tell them that's what I said. Things like only dress in green when you're applying for internship. Make up those things. Don't tell them what I'm telling you, because I'm giving you the good stuff. Okay. Rule number 1. If you're getting advice from someone who hasn't been actively involved in internship training in the last 10 years, don't listen to them. They're full of BS. They're likely actually to be harmful because they don't know how the current internship system works. The internship system has changed tremendously over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, it was possible to say to a student who was from a university-based PhD program, don't worry, you're going to place. You're going to place. The only question is where you're placing. That's now completely obsolete advice, and much of the advice from over 10 years. So if your advisor is old, don't talk to them. Oh, thank you. 10. If they're old, don't talk to them. If they're young, you still might not want to talk to them. Find out how recent their experience is. Number 2, it is all about the match now between your interest and background and training opportunities and emphasis of the site. I don't like that, but it's true. Meaning that we used to be able to take an applicant that we didn't exactly match with us at EBMS. They did a great interview. We got done with them and we'd say, man, we like that person. And they're interested in our program, and let's go ahead and take a chance on them. We're not doing that, as are many internship sites. So it's all about the match between that site. Don't apply to sites where your training and background don't match what they're doing, because they're just going to toss you, by and large. In a recent study by Callahan and his colleagues in 2010, they looked at a wide variety of things that predicted who successfully matched. Gender, whether you were married, moving with a spouse or not, how many practicum training hours you had, all the kinds of things that you might expect. And they found only one thing that predicts successful placement, which is the number of interviews that you got. And and I think as a barometer, that's a pretty good barometer of how you're going to do. If you get 6 or more interviews, the odds are beginning to favor you pretty heavily. 6 or more invitations to interview. If you're getting less than 6, the odds are starting to decrease that you're going to match. And that's a pretty insignificant piece of data to pay attention to. Now, how do you maximize the number of interviews that you get? Well, you follow Archer's 10 points of advice, but point number 1 is pay attention to what the internship's emphasis is vis-a-vis your background and training. Now, this is something even your parents have been telling you when you left high school and went to undergraduate school, but it's true of internship training too. Group your applications into 3 tiers. You know this thing, right? 5 pretty high level internship sites that you would like to place with, but you think it's a little risky. 5 that you feel like that's right in your sweet spot. You should place with them. You'd love to go there. It's a good match. You think you have a really decent chance there. And 5 that you think are backups that you can fall back on. Just be careful now that the backups are a place that you actually want to go. Don't just pick places that you think you'll get in, because you may have to go there. But pick some places that you think that you should be a shoo-in, back your bet up by applying in tiers. Not T-E-A-R-S, you know what I mean. No matter what anyone tells you, even in our current highly automated match system, networking really is important. It will always be important as long as human beings are involved in the process. The fact that your dissertation chairs knows someone at EBMS and can call them and say, hey, this person is really good, always helps. So network as much as you possibly can in terms of the internship process. Use all the connections you have, bribe faculty members, etc. Networking, however, interacts with timing. Every year we have a couple of people who contact us so early in the process that none of us remember who the hell it was by the time the actual internship selection process comes. So don't peak too early. And don't peak too late, meaning you certainly don't want to try to influence the process. Every internship training site, many of them, most of them, have a training committee that rank orders everyone. And after they rank ordered everyone, that's not going to be subject to change. So you want to do it, a few weeks before the internship match process and interview process. You want to max out your networking. Individualize your application as much as possible to the specific training site. That's just another way of saying it's all about the match. But individualize it. One size does not fit all. Know what your letters of reference say about you. Every year I look at letters of reference for applicants that really are not particularly helpful. I always wonder if the intern knew that. And there's always a few that just really sink someone. And it's quite clear to me that the intern couldn't have had an idea of what the letter said, or they wouldn't have been using those letters of reference. So I would know what your letter of references said, if at all possible. If you don't, keep asking people until you find 3 people that are sure of what they're writing for you. Practice your interviews with your classmates and maybe your dissertation chair or whoever, because the bear smells fear, and you don't want it to know that you're afraid. So sit down, practice. When you're practicing, really, come on, you know what the basic questions are always going to be at any. Why did you apply here? What's your dissertation about? What are you going to do after you finish your internship training? You should have stock answers for that. Now, you want to, as a good actor, you want to make them sound spontaneous when you give them, like you just thought of it for the, oh, really, what am I going to do after Now that I think about it, I'd like to just rattle off some things. So be prepared for all the predictable questions. But just as important, I always point out, is just as important as how you respond to questions is the questions you ask. And I have had intern applicants every year who kind of run out of gas at that stage. They give me great answers. And then I say, do you have any questions for me? And they say, no. No, I can't think of any. That's a bad answer. You should always think of some. And those questions should, to the fullest extent possible, be about your knowledge of the internship site. Dr. Archer, can you tell me about the PM&R rotation? Can I have more detail about that? How does that work? Is that spinal cord injury and brain injury? But that's a great question because it shows the applicant knows where they are that day. They're at EVMS. We have a PM&R rotation. Even better, I will point out, is the question, Dr. Archer, are you still doing that wonderful work on the MMPIA? Where I read your book. You know, I read your book almost every night. It's changed my life and the life of most people I know. That will always work, I need to tell you. So at least knowing something about who you're interviewing with is always helpful. A little brown nosing goes a long way, and knowing the background of the person you're interviewing with is great. All right, so with all those statements in mind, I wish you, thank you for your attention. I wish you the very best of luck in the internship process. And I wish that any of the bears that you meet in your internship application and postdoctoral fellowship applications look like these friendly little critters here. All right, and don't forget, Radhika will refund your entire graduate training expense.
Dr. Smith, could I trouble you for some water? Thank you, Steve. So I'm Mark Blaze. I'm the director of the Psychological Evaluation and Research Laboratory at Massachusetts General Hospital. I am also the coordinator of the adult track, the adult elective, we can't call it a track anymore, of the APA internship. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Of which Dr. Smith is a graduate. No, he was at the child track. That is correct. But he was one of our postdocs. And I've been doing that, 15, 17 years now. In many ways, my talk is going to be quite a bit like Dr. Archer's talk, which either will give you the opportunity to learn through repetition or a chance to be bored. Hopefully it'll be the repetition. It will be slightly different because I'm going to, in doing this, putting this together, I wanted to present to you sort of what it means to train in a medical center, and also to give you some insights or observations, probably the same word, that I have taken away from interviewing and sitting in with the training committee and making those kinds of rankings for 15 years, and the kinds of things that come up when we do that. All right. Okay. A little background. All right, so an academic medical center. These are essentially graduate schools for psychiatrists or for physicians. So physicians go to medical school, they learn general medicine, and then they have to go someplace and get trained in their specialty. And so that's what the academic medical center is. It has a combined mission of excellence in patient care, training, and research. Excellence. Research and training are very, very important. They bring in lots of money. They give us prominence. But patient care is critical. We don't, even though it loses a little money, we don't survive if we don't treat patients. And we treat the sickest and the most complex cases, patients. Mass General, people come from all over. There is no simple case. I was surprised to find that 8% of APA internships are located in academic medical centers. And most emphasize, but not all, but most emphasize assessment, like my program. So this is an opportunity. There are a number of internships out there. It's a chance to find some. But in a way, it's a very different environment from graduate school. And if you haven't been exposed to it, if you don't really know what you're getting into, you're going to run into some unexpected problems or bears. These are very fast-paced environments. You move quickly. They're multidisciplinary. Podiatrists, social workers, physiatrists. They're hierarchical. It means there's a physician in charge. It means people know where they are in the order of things. And they're result-oriented. Stuff has to get done. May not be like graduate school. It's a medical model, biopsychosocial. You have to sort of buy into it and believe it. They take the DSM pretty much as being real. So they believe in those disorders. Even when the next one comes out and they change all the disorders, they'll still believe those are real. So you have to sort of go along with that and believe they're real. Physicians are in charge. So I've been working in a medical center like this for 23 years, and one of the things that I've realized is that there are some significant differences having been trained as a psychologist and having been trained as a physician. Psychologists study people. We're really interested in people. Physicians study diseases. They're very interested in the disease, whatever their specific disease is. If we can combine those two together, it actually works very well. But you have to recognize that there is a difference. And you have to be able to tolerate that there's going to be some frictions at times. At MGH, there's actually a very long history of psychologists being at the hospital. In fact, they've been there since 1911, before there was a Department of Psychiatry. So Louisville, Eugene, Red Tie, Emerson, who was William James's last doctoral student, came to the hospital as the first psychologist in 1911. He partnered with James Jack Putman, J.J. Putman, who was a neurologist and Harvard's first professor of diseases of the nervous system. They popularized a self-taught version of Freud's treatment. And when Putman stepped down or retired, Emerson took over his practice and was successful until he caught a rare illness and died. But it starts with this model of the physician-psychologist partnership as a career path. So it begins in 1911, and it continues through a century later. Modern times. Psychologists are widely employed in academic medical centers. There's lots of us working there, but it's not always a piece of cake. Yet, you have a chance to do a lot of things, and it can be a really good career opportunity. So, in 23 years, I've had the opportunity to develop a psychotherapy service. I've directed an inpatient unit. I've been an attending in the emergency room. I was the first psychologist attending. I've been involved in NIMH. I've been on funded research grants as a methodologist of all things. And I've created an assessment center, which I now run. And I've also had the great opportunity to train lots of other psychologists. So there's lots of things you can do if you can get into one of these settings. There's lots of opportunity. But it's not for everyone. So would it be right for you? Well, that depends. So how are you going to get an interview? We've heard you need 6. So Dr. Archer spoke sort of from the overarching perspective. The numbers you saw, it's daunting. It's even daunting, though, when you're on an admissions committee or a training committee. For 12 slots, we get 400 to 500 applications. And out of that, we're going to interview probably 150 people for 12 spots. So at our end, there's just and it increases every year. There's just a staggering number of applications that come in. Now, one of the things when we do psychological assessment, we're saying to ourselves, we want to sample a broad enough range of behavior so we can make valid inferences. What I've noticed in 15 years is that as the number of applicants increases, we may not be sampling enough at the end of our interviewing and our reviewing of applications to really make sort of the best judgment, because the amount of time that we have sort of drops. So how to get your application through just the original review process so that you get an interview. Show us that you're well prepared. Have broad, meaningful clinical experience. A good range of coursework. Schools really vary in what they have you do. Have some evidence of research productivity. 0 publications. You're not going to get in the door. I'm sorry. I think the class that we took 2 years ago, or last year, had on average 5 publications. Breadth versus depth. Now this is about the fit. So if you're applying to my track, if you want to work with me, I want a lot of breadth. I want you to have done a lot of things. If you're applying to our CBT track or our behavioral medicine track, they want depth. They want you to know a certain area and they want you to know it really well. So know that about where you're applying. Understand what people want. So I look for broad training. I don't, but other people look for deep, narrow training. Send us everything we ask for. Don't give us any reason to just kick you out of the pile. Because if I've got to go through 110 applications to find 30 people to interview, any reason. Okay, so send everything, send it the way we want it, and if you're applying for one of the 2 spots that I have some pre-existing assessment interest that you can demonstrate that it didn't just happen when you were deciding to apply for obviously you're here at SPA, so you have it, but you'd be surprised when you're reading an application, somebody all of a sudden will say, and I didn't have any assessment training in my program, and I didn't have any practicums, and your spot would be great for me to round out this area of weakness. You're like, okay, yeah, not so good for me though. So, but what are we talking about for internship assessment training? Try to just demonstrate that you've mastered some basics. I don't want to have to teach you how to administer and score and make very basic interpretations. I'm willing to work at the basic interpretation thing for a while, but I don't want to have to, we call it boot camp. We have like a week and a half in July when people come that we run them through all the tests we're going to use. I have to see that you're going to be able to do that. I can't spend a lot of time training you up because even though you just started July 1, the hospital's running. And so when I take you, you have a little time to make it up to speed, but not a lot. So know how to give the common tests. Try to learn one instrument well. Be able to show on your CV or on the interview that you know something about one test. You have to know about a lot of tests. Know the common test adequately and know one test sort of well. And then have a range of experience, the best you can. And I know it's hard, but seek it out. It shows that you're trying. It shows your interest. I want to see that you've worked with a variety of patients in a variety of settings. If all you've done is educational evaluations at the counseling center or at your school's learning resources center, it's not the same as having experience at a community mental health center, at an inpatient unit, at a rehab hospital. Try to have a variety of experiences. Please, know some psychometrics. Again, statistically minded. You'll be surprised how few people actually understand what makes up a test, how you put it together, how you understand it, how you evaluate it. what a standard error of measure means and why you bracket it around a score. All right. You've gotten the interview. Now what? Dr. Archer mentioned this. The first thing we ask when we sit down and we go over all the candidates is, are they a good fit? Do they match us? Now that means make yourself look like you want to do what we do. My service has a premium on patient care. During the interviews, if there's this sense that I get that you're not that excited about seeing patients, that you need an hour or two of supervision for every hour of clinical work that you do, it's not going to be a good fit. So in the French Revolution, surgeons used to be looked down upon. They were a whole different variety of physician, of doctor, and actually they were more akin to barbers and whatnot. And in the French Revolution, the physicians all sort of sided with the royalty, and the surgeons went with the revolt. And the physicians were telling the surgeons that they wouldn't let them go into their universities to be trained. And they said to the surgeons, let the hospitals be your library and the patients be your books. And that's really what it is at an internship like mine. The hospital is your library. The patients are your books. Get involved with it. Learn as much as you can while you're there. We want people who can see the value in clinical experience and can figure out that who have that understanding that clinical experience really is a way of learning. Each case is an opportunity to gain knowledge, experience, and skill. And if you can't show me that through the interview, then it's going to be hard for me to say that you're a good fit. On internship, I like to say, clinical work is the foundation of learning. I have shortened that. I say to the interns, the work is the learning. So they say to me, well, when are we going to learn stuff? I say, the work is the learning. Come back and we'll talk about your work. All right. Tip number 2, have the qualities. So after we decide that you're a good fit, that you have the right interests or background, we want to know, do you have the qualities that it's going to take to be here? So interns have to adapt quickly, very quickly, to a variety of situations. Don't look or act too nervous. Appear open to challenges. If we say, your interview schedule has been changed and now you have to go someplace and meet it with somebody at a different time, don't get all flustered. Take it, accept it, do your best. Show either through your CV, through your letters, that you have persistence and resilience, because there are a lot of hard times that come up in these kinds of training programs. So patient care, adaptability, completion, getting stuff done. We have to write notes. We have to write reports. We have to do our shifts in the APS. We have to get people beds. We have to hospitalize, discharge. Things have to happen. So somehow I have to know that you can work quickly, and work to completion. So you have to be able to get things done. That has to come through someplace. If you've been working on your dissertation for 5 or 6 years and maybe it's going to be done and it's, the date is almost coming in, I'm going to start to get a sense that you don't get things done. We work as a team. It's a multidisciplinary hospital. We have to be able to get along with people, even though we're all a bunch of cats and we don't herd well. We still have to be able to play with each other. So we have to know there has to be some sense that you're going to be able to create smooth relationships, get along, and handle conflicts without going over the top. So again, those are the kinds of things that we have to be able to tell in this brief interaction with you or through your materials that you send to us, that you have these skills. Convey the attitude. So be confident, but not arrogant. Conduct yourself like a professional in training. Be respectful to everybody. Everybody. I almost didn't want to put this up here, but we'll be sitting there. People will have great impressions of somebody, and the secretary will come in and say, "You won't believe what they did. You won't believe the way they act. I almost hate to say it. Just be respectful to everybody. Everybody's smart. You're not going to impress me by being smart. Show me how you're helpful, how you're useful. What are you going to do? Are you willing to do windows? That's one of the things we talk about in our meetings. Will they do windows? I don't think so. They don't really seem like that's beneath them. You have to be, obviously, trustworthy, dependable, reliable. But I have to be able to sense that. There can't be any hint, because if you come as an intern, then you represent the service, our staff, me. If I'm the supervisor, you're my eyes and ears. You go places, you bring back information. I have to be able to trust that. There can't be any hint that you embellish things, that if I ask you a question and you come up with an answer that you think is creative or whatnot, it's better to just say you don't know or then make stuff up. Because I have to be able to trust you. I need people to realize that the practice and science are the same thing. So here's a question I get asked all the time. How much time will be set aside for my research? The answer is none. We're practitioner scientists. Where practice ends and research starts, I have no idea. And I don't see any meaningful distinction. Every patient can provide data, and all the data we collect helps us with our clinical work. In fact, every case we see goes into a de-identified database so that we have demographics, every test that we gave, and starting in a couple of months, we have a website that's behind the firewall that will allow us to get prospective data after we've tested them from referrers and from the patients themselves. The science happens all the time. So clinical work generates research questions that we're interested in, and research informs what we do. There is no divide. So if you get puzzled about that and you're wondering when you're going to take off your white coat as a clinician and put on your other coat as a researcher, you're not going to fit. There's so many of you. Good, dependable, bright, publications, know some instruments, maybe even have a connection. You have to have something. So you have to have an it skill. And this is the question I ask. Beyond your enthusiasm, what is it that you're going to bring that's of value to us? Should we agree to invest in training you for a year or two? What will you bring to us beyond that you're smart and enthusiastic? It'd be nice if you had a data analytics skill, especially one that I don't have. So it'd be nice if, you could do some structural equation modeling, or if you could do some latent growth curves. That would be really nice. IRT, I pretty much can do that. I'm getting less infatuated with confirmatory factor analysis. But it would be nice if you had an analytics skill that would help me. Or it'd be nice if you could do something like program a computer, create an accurate Excel scoring program, do a certain number of things that would help us out. What do you have? Maybe you can test in another language. Maybe you're bilingual. That could be your it skill. But you have to have something. There has to be something that makes you just not one more bright green pea in the pot. So you have to stand out in some way. So those qualities are necessary. We talk about this. We go through lots of applications. Interview 4 days. 4 days. 6 to 8 people a day to find 2 interns. It's a lot of my time. So there's just lots that goes into this. So these are the qualities that I look for. If you have them, you'll get ranked. Then you'll get in, maybe. And if you were to come to an academic medical center, so I'm sort of going back to the beginning. I'm trying to tell you a little bit here about why you might want to come. What would you get? You're going to get a professional identity. So the internship experience, creating your identity, is one of the most critical aspects of that year. Becoming a professional. And you create your identity in an academic medical center or at Mass General, that thing is titanium. It doesn't tarnish. It doesn't break. you're solid. And how do you get it? In my opinion, it comes through the repeated efforts to apply your skills to patients. It comes through repeated clinical experience. Regardless of the patient's condition, psychology is always relevant. They say this over and over. Oh, they were asleep, or they were going down for a medical test, or their hands were in a cast, or they were in a coma. Forget it. Psychology is relevant. Get in there. Do something. Your identity comes by repeatedly demonstrating that relevance to yourself and to the people you work with. Because I'm here, I'll have to talk about me, how I created my identity. So I consider myself a professional consultant. I model my consultants are very prevalent at academic medical centers. They're widely used. Doctors know how to use them. They want consultants. My style is modeled after a couple of neurologists that I worked with and a couple of cardiologists. They come in, they know what they're doing, see the patient, do their reports, provide their input, get out of the way. That's what I want to do. And this is one of the places where it happened. So in August, everybody's gone at the hospital. And I'm a postdoc. And I get overhead paged. This is many years ago. I'm walking through the hospital, and all of a sudden it says, Dr. Blaze, report to the chief's office. You know, crap, being fired. So I go up to see the chief of psychiatry. And as I walk in, he's got two other senior psychiatrists with them, and they're completing this evaluation of a very prominent individual, and they need projective testing to rule out psychosis. So I have the chief, and I have two other senior psychiatrists who just want a Rorschach. So I take all the courage that I have at that moment, and I say, you know, I don't think that's going to be right. I can't do a Rorschach. It's going to have limited value. I actually have to do what I do, my consultation. I have to do my battery of tests, and without that information, I can't help you. Then I close my eyes, because I'm pretty sure they're going to kill me. Tested the patient, and the patient had a nonverbal learning disability. And had I not done that, they would have thought he was psychotic. I wouldn't have done anything to help the patient. And not only did I help the patient, I helped myself, and I also helped these three very senior psychiatrists realize that this is a process. You don't just order a test. I'm not a technician. I'm a consultant. I have an array of skills, and I have to apply them. All right, I should be wrapping up. Conclusions. So there actually are, these are great places to do an internship. Might not be right for everybody. They're very different than departments of psychology and some other traditional mental health settings. They're medical hospitals. As a psychologist, you always have to demonstrate your value. 23 years later, I still have to do it on a daily basis. The focus is on clinical care. The work is the learning. After an internship like that, you will be able to evaluate, diagnose, treat, or refer anybody who walks through your door appropriately. And I don't think you can ask for anything more from an internship training.
Okay. I assume the anxiety in the room is pretty high by now. If I were applying for internship, I'd be very anxious. And I forget that I also trained at a medical school. So, I'm not here to make you anxious, but I would like to address the issue that often comes up when people talk to me, which is, oh, forensic psychology sounds so interesting. It must be just so interesting every day. And what people don't realize is that it's awfully hard. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of it, which is not easy, and then the challenges that you have. And then I want to talk about training programs and how to make yourself ready for those. This is awfully high. While the screen shows that I'm affiliated with UCLA, I want to be clear that I'm clinical faculty at UCLA. All of my income is generated from doing forensic practice and clinical psychology in the community. The practice of forensic psychology is a specialty, and it requires a lot of knowledge of the law. It requires knowledge of psycho-legal terms and a knowledge of case law. And if you're not sure what case law is, each time someone appeals a case and it's heard by a higher court, usually the Supreme Court of your state, if there's an opinion that's publishable, that comes out as case law, and that can add to or change what the legislature has created, or it can further define what the legislature has created. And we as forensic people have to rely on those pieces of case law as well as legislative law, and you have to know all that. Psycho-legal terms are legal terms of art that can't properly be applied without acquiring a foundation of the law, a foundation of understanding of the law, to understand basically how the law arose and how higher courts have chosen to interpret the law. Training in forensic psychology requires applying psychological data, for example, understanding developmental issues and issues in abnormal psychology or issues in test assessment, to the psycho-legal questions that courts raise. Sales et al., who I cite here, and I'll give you the reference for that at the end of my presentation, have identified more than 75 areas of law that substantially affect the provision of forensic services. That's a lot of law to become familiar with. The practice of forensic psychology requires an appreciation of the dire consequences of errors. We're not playing around in the courtroom. You can make mistakes that violate people's civil rights. You can put forth an opinion that results in an erroneous conviction. We've had a member of SBA who is accused of that. You can present testimony that results in someone having a very long sentence. For example, if you decide that you're going to be an expert in the PCLR and you're going to call someone a psychopath, you have to realize that that's going to result in a particular impression with the jury that could put that person away for a long time, could even result in the death penalty. The practice of forensic psychology requires the ability to communicate with lay people. That's one of my favorite parts, because as a young psychologist, I felt like people didn't understand mental health very well, and that it would be a good thing to be able to educate people. Only now do I realize that most jurors don't really listen, so they don't really understand. It goes too fast for them. Also, it requires comfort with being cross-examined without becoming defensive, and that's very, very difficult. I think being cross-examined is a lot like having your orals about 6 times a year. Every piece of what you've done can be questioned. You can be accused of being unethical. I mean, it can really be quite a challenge to a person who doesn't have a resilient ego. And also, you have to have the humility to be able to admit mistakes and admit them in a public arena, in front of a jury, with someone typing down what you say that you know can be quoted in the future. And it requires the willingness and temperament to conduct yourself in a professional manner in the forensic setting you have chosen. For example, in criminal court, we're often required to confront danger and the dark side of life. I hear gruesome experiences and gruesome accounts of crimes. I look at crime photos that are gruesome, sometimes of dead children, sometimes of people mutilated and so forth. And you have to prepare yourself that you're going to be, if you're working in criminal or civil, that you might be seeing the darker side of life. And you need to have enough psychological health and enough support in your social life to be able to do that kind of work. And the danger is more, I think, testifying against a dangerous person. Those of us who live in cities are often working with members of gangs. And in Los Angeles, any given gang member has a number of enemies, rival gangs. So you have to think about, if I testify for this person, will there be retaliation? I don't know of any psychologist in Los Angeles that has ever had retaliation, but you have to consider the possibility. And if you're testifying for the prosecution, you also have to consider the possibility that the defendant or his family or someone from prison could come after you. So you can't be naive about the potential for danger. Okay, what are some of the forensic arenas? There's criminal court, and I do most of my work there. There's civil court, and I do some work in civil court, usually when it comes to claims of post-traumatic stress disorder or emotional injury. There's family court. Family court is where divorces happen, and those involve child custody. There's federal court, and the federal rules of evidence are a little different than most state courts have. Many of us do mitigation reports because in federal court there's a whole methodology for the judge to consider psychological factors for downward departures in sentencing. But federal court also has insanity cases and other kinds of mental state defenses. There's juvenile delinquency. And last year, I don't know if you were here, and I talked about, in my master lecture, I talked about some of the specialty areas of skill to evaluate young people, juveniles involved in delinquency court, competency to stand trial, understanding Miranda warnings, and so forth. And then there's juvenile dependency, and that's where child abuse and neglect cases are heard. So if you're inclined to work with children, or you're a specialist in trauma, or in bonding, attachment, that's where those cases are heard. Generally, the forensic psychologist is a consultant to legal arenas, to lawyers or the court, and maybe an expert witness. But forensic psychology is now taken to mean something more broad. At the end, I'm going to give you two excellent references which really describe and cover the field as it currently is. And both of them indicate that forensic psychology now may be broadly defined to include research on relevant legal topics. And it may also be defined as preparing to do forensic mental health administration or be involved in public policy. It's broader than it was defined when I entered the field. I'd like to make a distinction, though, between forensic psychology and correctional psychology, because the training programs are really different and the kind of work you would be doing is really different. Forensic psychology historically has involved pretrial evaluation and expert testimony for all types of courts. Correctional psychology involves evaluating prisoners or the mental health treatment of prisoners, and you are in a correctional setting, which you have to decide, I guess, whether you're comfortable with. Sometimes young women come to me and say, I'm not sure which direction I want to go, but there's an internship and they name maybe the Federal Correctional Center or something like that. And I think it's very tough to be day after day with prisoners. First of all, it's dangerous. And if you're a woman, it's extra dangerous. And also, it's being around people, probably a good proportion of whom are sociopaths. And so that's very difficult. There's a much higher likelihood for malingering and manipulation if it's not malingering. It's very different than being in the community and evaluating people pre-trial. I want people to understand that there are lots of forensic journals, and that as graduate students, you can peruse them and sort of get a feel for what the field is like. When I first started in forensic psychology, which was a long, long time ago, and I don't think I agree with Dr. Archer that you shouldn't consult with someone who's old, because we have a real sense of the history of the field and how it's developed, and do keep tabs on what's happening now. There weren't that many forensic journals, and there weren't that many forensic training programs, but you can see the array, and there's some really good research published in these journals. Okay, routes to forensic training. I'll talk about my own route first, and then talk a little bit about the routes that are available to you. I did my internship. I'm a graduate of a Boulder Model program, and I did my internship at LAC USC Medical Center, which had the attributes that Dr. Blaze discussed, and was an excellent place to train. I'm a strong advocate that a forensic psychologist should first be a very good clinical psychologist, and I've always had the goal of being strong in clinical psychology, both in what I teach at UCLA and what I publish. And in fact, my ABAP is not in forensic, it's in assessment. And that reflects my values, that I'm a clinical psychologist and consultant to the court. I don't do case after case and consider myself just a forensic psychologist. I knew I wanted to be a forensic psychologist when I went on internship, and that's why I chose LAC USC, because the USC Institute of Psychiatry and the Law is just down the hall. And I thought if they met me and I had more familiarity with what they did, I'd have a better chance of getting in. And that turned out to be a fabulous decision for me. At the time I trained there, Dr. Pollack, who was its creator, was still alive. He died 2 years later. And the program was very intensive. We had 3 days a week of lectures from lawyers and judges in family law, civil law, and criminal law. And then we did tons and tons of cases. I figured out that year I did 150 supervised cases, which to me, even then, sounded like a lot. They kept us really busy. And we were also reading all the things. We were reading case law and journal articles and so forth. So it was about a 60-hour-a-week endeavor, and it was great. I've never been sorry I did that, and I compare my ability to compete with other people in the community favorably because I did that and they didn't. I started as faculty at UCLA and built my forensic practice gradually. Now, as I stand here, I'm on a number of court panels. I'm on the Superior Court of Los Angeles County panel of psychiatric and psychological experts for criminal court, and for dependency court, and for delinquency court. And I also do many private evaluations for forensic matters. I still teach at UCLA. I have one course a year, which is advanced assessment, and looks at specialty topics like violence risk assessment, psychological assessment of psychosis, of mood disorders, of post-traumatic stress disorder, and so forth. And I serve on the Voluntary Clinical Faculty Committee, which reviews credentials for people applying to teach at UCLA. Interestingly, the committee has about 6 psychiatrists and 2 or 3 psychologists, and almost everyone is a forensic person, which I think is pretty amazing, since we're really looking at credentials for everyone. What could be your route? I've chosen mostly criminal work, and that is endlessly fascinating. It's also extremely difficult. Civil work is easier. It pays more. It is less time intense because you have more time to prepare cases. Family court work is similar to that, but you have warring people warring over children, willing to put children in the middle of things. I think it's emotionally difficult. And I can describe each subspecialty in greater detail if you're interested after the presentation. What about preparing, actually? Let's see. Where do you go? Okay. One more. Two more. Yeah, okay. In the references that I'm going to give you, this point is made frequently. There's little agreement in the field regarding the appropriate training models, curricula, and goals of a specialized training program in forensic psychology. These days, you can get some undergraduate experience. I'm sure everybody here is beyond that, so I won't elaborate. There are a number of graduate programs that offer either courses or a forensic track in forensic psychology. If you go on the APLS website, there's a list of all kinds of training programs that they acknowledge and describe. I'm not going to try to talk about each program and what they offer. There's also the possibility of doing a joint doctoral program with a PhD or a PsyD in psychology and a law degree. And far fewer people do that, but it's quite an interesting combination and probably prepares you to be a consultant extraordinaire as well as a public policy maker and maybe even vetting psychologists or the practice of law just with mental health law. It's a pretty strong combination. I think clinical training with graduate level forensic courses are good, but I think they're insufficient. And that's because they can't possibly give you the depth and the experience that you'll need to call yourself a forensic psychologist. They're an introduction, okay? I strongly recommend an internship with a forensic focus, and even better, and my highest recommendation would go to a postdoctoral training program of a year or 2 years where that's really all you do, and you're learning law in your jurisdiction, and you're doing forensic cases under supervision. And then I really recommend continued emphasis by updating your skills, taking CPE courses. And those are available, as you know, they're available here. The ABAP Boards in Forensic has a group of people that offer those as well, and they're really very good. I've already described the training at USC, so I will say that one of the things that I offer in Los Angeles, and I created it because students asked me to, is a practicum in forensic psychology. So far I've had 4 graduate students. One was pre-doctoral and did 2 years with me, and the rest have been interns that created a practicum rotation and basically came to my office and followed me around. They went to jails with me, and I tried to expose them to a variety of dependency and delinquency and criminal cases and gave them a lot of stuff to read and had them doing testing and so forth. And I managed to get one of my internship practicum students into USC's Institute of Psychiatry and Law, which she's now finished, and she was really happy with the training there still, even though it's been lots of years since I went there. Here are some of the basic competencies that you should have as and look for in a program of training in forensic. You should start with being a good clinical psychologist. You should have core knowledge in the basic areas of psychology, such as developmental, abnormal, assessment, ethics, and so forth. And you should know research design and statistics because you're going to be reading published articles in forensic, and you need to understand the methodologies of those. You need a program that will teach you the law in relevant areas and also how to do research on the law. And then you need to know what research is being conducted in law and psychology areas. And there's a lot of great stuff that's going on now. Last year I talked about Thomas Grisso and all the stuff he's doing with competency to stand trial, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then you know how to do you need to know or be trained to do applied forensic mental health assessments. And the reason I recommend a postdoc is you'll be doing a number of them. You won't just have 5 or 6, you'll have 50 or 60, or if they work you to death, you'll have 150 like I had. In applying for forensic training in graduate school, whether or not your program had a forensic segment or you had forensic courses, consider finding a forensic professional in your community and ask them if you can do a practicum with them. This is what several students did with me, and even though it took extra time for me, I was happy to do it because, as you know, one of APA's strongest ethics is that psychologists give back and that we donate a proportion of our time pro bono. Some psychologists don't really know that, but it is a strong value in psychology. So I was happy to do it. And it's always been my experience that when I teach, I learn stuff from students. So I felt it was great, and I'm sure there'd be people in your community who would be willing to do it. In your free time, that's a joke, try to read some from the journals that I listed. Choose a topic that you like or try to read broadly. Some of it is just plain interesting, especially the case presentations, and some of it's a little more dry, but I know you're used to reading stuff that's dry. And then consider an internship that has a forensic component, or really consider a postdoc. Simply apprenticing under one psychologist is not a good idea because the focus is too narrow, and you might only get a skill set that's related to what that person does. I've had people approach me and ask me if they could do that with me, and I've refused that unless they're willing to also do a postdoc. So I see what I have to offer as an introduction and some practical experience, and I can write them a letter of recommendation, but I can't pretend to train someone in the broad way that is really required. Again, strongly recommended. Try to be broad-based in your clinical training and your skills and interest. Try to expose yourself to a broad range of forensic issues. For example, don't just get segmented off into competency evaluations or just working with children. And consider a forensic postdoc. These are the references. I want to point out that Jackson's Learning Forensic Assessment is just an excellent introduction to the broad range of practical evaluations that we do. And it's available here. It's a Rutledge book, and it's available. I saw it up there on the table. The one article I cited is listed there, Training in Forensic Assessment. And then I also recommend Krause and Sales' chapter on training in forensic psychology, and that's in Irv Weiner and Alan Hess's book, 2006. Both of those are more broad-based than what I'm saying here. And then check out the APLS website. That's Division 41, and they're pretty nice to students there. They have a lot of interesting stuff going on, and they have listed and given you information about forensic internships and forensic postdocs. And then they also have the specialty guidelines for forensic psychologists, and I think it's really important to read through that because it's an extension of our APA ethical guidelines. And I've put my email there. You're welcome to email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Thanks.
Okay. I'm wondering what the level of anxiety in the room is. I'm beyond internship and still get anxious talking about it. So I'm going to try to be a little more lighthearted, and partly that is because we're talking about postdocs, and you'll be beyond your internship, and you'll feel like the world is getting much better, and there's sun on the horizon. And also, I should mention, I am a postdoc right now. That's part of the reason why it was a strategic choice for me to present. I recently went through the process of both internship and securing a postdoc. So I feel like I have got some of the recency effect that Bob kind of talked about, of being quite familiar, but also having kind of navigated successfully, at least to some extent. So I think we're going to have lots of time for questions. If people have questions about the stuff that I'm presenting during the talk, feel free to raise your hand. I don't want to be too formulaic about it at the conversation. So I really want to provide you guys with some direction, especially in the postdoc process. I'm going to talk a little bit about thinking programmatically about where you want to go, which, as Nancy really did a nice job of pointing out in forensic training, really starts out in graduate school and moves through internship into postdoc and then into your professional career. And I think the postdoctoral training really highlights that as you start moving closer and closer to an area of specialization. Specialization in clinical psychology especially is starting earlier and earlier. So Dr. Blaze mentioned very closely how important it is to have experiences in the site that you apply for internship, which starts moving you towards a specialization right there. And then postdoc is really the next place to get specialized, in-depth training that's going to prepare you for your career. So currently, like I said, I'm a postdoc in the Development and Psychopathology Research Training Program at the Child and Family Center at the University of Oregon. This is a National Institute of Mental Health T32 program. So there's a number of postdocs and pre-doctoral trainees in this program. So I'm going to talk a little bit in this presentation about the experience of being in this type of program and other ones that are like it. And I also want to try to gauge a little bit about the audience and what you guys are hoping to go into. So just as a show of hands, who is kind of thinking more towards long-term research, potentially looking for a research postdoc, faculty position, something like that? Okay, a couple, good, okay. I'm not going to be totally off base. And then who is more on the clinical track? Most folks, okay. If you had a perfect world, who would like to do a little bit of both? Not mutually exclusive. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk a lot about research because that's been my experience. That's what I know the best. That's what I tried to get. So I'm going to have a little bit on that side. However, I really tried to be mindful of the points that I made and hoping that they are going to apply also to clinical training positions. So I think a lot of the stuff that I say when I talk about research is going to be very applicable to clinical training as well. And I'll try to balance that as well. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge a couple folks and be fully disclosing about this. So portions of my talk actually appeared in a newsletter article for the Society for Child and Family Policy and Practice. I was asked by the newsletter article, or the newsletter editor, to write an article about this kind of issue, specifically for the audience of the society. And what we did for this was I actually got contributions from 3 very prominent experts in this area that answered basically the question, how do I go about looking for postdocs? What do I do? And so I was able to get Sandra Bishop Joseph from Yale, who is part of the postdoc and internship training program there. Eric Runs, who actually was my employer prior to graduate school at the University of Washington School of Medicine. He runs a postdoc program there. And Mary Haskett, who is at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So a lot of the ideas that I'm going to share today about how to go about this process are not purely idiosyncratic to me, but really have to do with the collective knowledge of folks that are on the other side of this as well. So I think it's going to be kind of a balance between kind of like what Mark and Bob shared about what it's like to be on that application process evaluator side and also the person who's applying. I think most of you are probably thinking, oh God, I have to think about getting a postdoc already. I was in internship for a month before I started looking for postdoc positions and noticing that there were application deadlines in November and December. So unfortunately, this process starts much earlier than you think. And as you'll see, as I start going through my talk, the suggestion from these expert contributors that I have was to even start thinking about this much earlier than that. And I will have to admit, I did have a few in mind that I did apply to prior to internship. So thinking about this now is really not too early. But I know that internship kind of blooms ominously until you actually secure that position. So I can understand that the postdoc is not on your radar yet. I think one of the biggest things that I would stress in starting to think about your training is to think programmatically. Each step in the process really does lead into the next step. And everybody has really done a good job of pointing that out, how you really have to demonstrate fit. You have to demonstrate a match in order to match. And that is not exaggerated. So the practicum experiences that you select or that you're put into during graduate training are preparing you in some ways down a path. You're not locked into certain things, for sure. However, you're going to be a stronger candidate for positions later on in your career that you already have some experience with in most cases. And I think the other part about thinking programmatically is where do you want to be? Where do you want to end up? What do you want to do with your career, with your life? What do you want that experience to look like? And I think that thinking about each step and how it gets you closer to the next place and gets you ultimately to that goal is really going to be helpful. I'm also going to talk about starting early, things you can do, when you can do them, when you should do them, and a few things that I'll echo from other talks is you got to network. It is really, really important to make connections with folks, to use your graduate advisor, other people in other faculty in your program, to really start getting your name out there and starting to figure out for yourself too if it's someone that you want to work with. I'm going to give you some practical suggestions about where to actually find postdocs. One of the things that really kind of throws people off going from the internship application process to the postdoc process is the internship process is very linear. You do this at this time. Your application materials look very similar for most programs. The package looks the same. You have deadlines. You have the APIC. It really defines what you do. Postdoc is very different. It's not linear. Not all postdocs advertise. It's a very, very different process, and so I don't want people to get freaked out by that. But it is a little bit of a daunting process to figure out where to find places to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about contacting potential mentors and programs and things that those experts that contributed to this suggested that have been successful in the past. I'm going to talk a little bit, too, about organization and funding sources for postdocs, because that really does drive what your experience in that postdoc is going to be, and it's going to influence probably how you would apply to them. So a couple of different organizations I think we'll talk about are postdoctoral training programs, like the one that I'm involved in. Postdoc positions that are funded by projects or like larger R01 grants, things like that. These can be clinical and research. And I'm going to also give you a little bit of guidance on potentially getting your own funding. And this is not applicable only to researchers, although it is sort of the more likely route for a research person to apply for an NRSA or something similar. But there are sources for clinical internship or clinical postdoc funding as well. So one of the biggest questions I think that we're getting at here today is, does this fit? Does this internship, does this postdoc program fit where I want to go, and do I fit this program? So this is definitely a two-way street. And like I said before, does this program or this position that you're applying for as a postdoc, does it really help you get to where you ultimately want to be? And I think sometimes we get lured into positions that look great, and they probably are great, and they're at great institutions, they're working with great mentors, but at the same time, there may be some drawbacks about the specificity of the program, about location, clearly, that could actually make it more difficult for you to get where you want to go. And so really thinking through some of these different issues is really important. So one of the things that I think was really helpful for me is making sure that you apply to programs that you fit into. I applied to 6 postdoctoral training programs. I received an interview at every single one. And I don't think that was only a product of being a good candidate, but I think it was a major product of actually doing a lot of homework, making sure that these positions that I applied for, that I could very clearly make a case that I have the experience to jump in there, contribute, and to also learn from them in a way that's going to get me to the place that I want to be. So I am a kind of a child and family intervention science researcher with obviously a very heavy emphasis on the role of assessment in training and intervention. So I applied to places that really valued that. I can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. One of the other things that goes along with the postdoctoral process, like I said, selecting, is really to figure out what kind of experience you want. And this looks very different across different positions. It's important to ask questions about what it's like to be a postdoc in this program, if there's someone who's already there, if there's already researchers working as clinicians, if there's already clinicians working on research projects, ask them what the expectations are, what it's like to live in that city, to work with the folks that you're working with, what kind of atmosphere it is, all those kinds of things. From my own experience, I, as a researcher, wanted freedom. I wanted flexibility. I wanted to be able to choose projects that I wanted to do. And so I almost exclusively applied to research training programs rather than research positions that were project funded. Those project funded usually have an expectation that you fulfill a certain role on a project, like a project coordinator, or that you're doing assessments, things like that. And basically, I wanted to be able to pick up any data that I wanted that our center had, write projects, analyze data, and not be dictated to do certain things. So I selected programs based on that. I think clinical training is very similar. Are you going to be expected to, have a 40 client caseload every single week? Are you going to have a little bit more flexibility in choosing where and when you see people? Are you going to be able to potentially start specializing? Or do they have needs that they need to have filled, so you have to spend 2 days a week in this particular clinic? Those kinds of things. And those are really important things to ask and consider what it's going to be like for you to be a postdoctoral trainee in that position. So how do you do this? Like I said already, start early. And I can't emphasize this enough, but I also want to emphasize, too, not to panic. The postdoctoral process can be anxiety-provoking, maybe not as much as internship. And partly it is because you get to this place of, oh, crap, I should be thinking about postdocs. I don't know what I should do. I don't know where to go next. I'm hoping that I can alleviate some of that today. One of the panelists that I solicited, I don't know who actually mentioned this, they suggested that you should start thinking about postdoctoral positions as early as having your dissertation proposal approved. This could be for many of us who are a little bit, accelerated. This could be in your third year of graduate training. It could be in your second year. And it actually does make a lot of sense. The way that this person described how this has been successful in her experience or his experience was that people started to contact them after they had their dissertation approved, thinking about the next steps in their research. Clinical programs could be very similar, but the research part really comes into play here because they started developing a collaborative relationship with these researchers. They were able to actually take on some projects using their data, doing some collaboration, which ended up, after the person got an internship, ended up actually leading right into a postdoc. So getting these relationships started, starting thinking about where you want to go can be very helpful. And as I mentioned before, one of my tacks was to start looking for postdocs that fit even before internship. So when I was there on internship and had to start applying and thinking about these things, I already had 2 or 3 in the bag that I knew I'm a good fit for this. I don't have to go search for them. I've already got them. And so that helped the process just get started for me. Unfortunately, I think you do need to start earlier if you're research-oriented. Like I said with the previous example, really developing these relationships, starting a project, potentially trying to get something published takes a long time. We all know that the publication process and review process is slow. So it really does take on a little different piece if you're looking for a research career. It also is helpful to start early if you want to pursue specialized clinical training. So especially things that have specialized postdoctoral components like forensic psychology, like neuropsychology, where they really do expect you to be on a path towards this type of postdoctoral experience, you really do have to prepare for that. So in my program, we had about 7 different options for practicum experience. And people really were able to select settings that they wanted to be in based on where they wanted to go. So I chose child and family sites almost exclusively. When I went to a residential treatment center, I worked in a children's hospital, so I got varied settings with different kinds of clinical experience, different kinds of supervisory styles to try to get kind of a broad base, but it all had a theme. And I think when you start applying for postdoctoral positions and even jobs after that, it becomes incredibly important to tell a coherent story about how you got to where you got. And you really want to show that in graduate school I started doing this, it led into an internship that had a similar focus, it led into a postdoc, and it really does take on that piece. So to start thinking about that as early as selecting practicums, choosing clients in your clinic is really helpful to get you underway to where you want to be. Let's see. Oh, wow. Applying for your own funding. I briefly pursued an F32 award, which is an NRSA Postdoctoral Research Training Award for an individual. We started about 3 months before internship started and realized very quickly that we had to start doing it. I would have had, even if it got funded, I would have had a lapse between the end of internship and the postdoc, or when the funding would have kicked in for my postdoc. So that again takes on even a more important start early emphasis if you're going to try to seek your own funding. On the other side of things, I have a couple of colleagues that have been successful in garnering individual grants for clinical training. And they actually applied for those during internship, but they did start very early. So within the first couple of months, they started identifying funding sources, potential postdoctoral mentor, seeking foundation support, and then applying for those because the review process does take time. So the example I'm thinking of specifically is a colleague that I was on internship with in Colorado applied to the Colorado Health Foundation and received a grant to study basically the psychologist's role in integrated care in medical settings. So he had a very specific focus, I think, on he was going to do bariatric assessment research and then also and clinical work and also work in a bone marrow transplant clinic. So there are foundation support for clinical research or clinical experience as well that has research component or not. So you could find your own funding for clinical training as well. And I already have said this, but applying happens right after you start an internship. And it's a crazy time. You're just getting your feet wet, and unfortunately in most internships, you really feel like you just get thrown in the deep end, and you're treading water for the first couple of months. And you do have to start within the first 6 weeks to 2 months thinking about, what am I going to do next? And that's why even thinking about this before you start internship and feeling prepared and having a bit of a plan is really going to help not feel like you're drowning, because it can feel like that sometimes. One thing, though, that I'd like to say about this starting early piece is to also be flexible. So a lot of times your internship is going to lead into a postdoc. You're going to develop connections with people in your internship training program, in the larger hospital that you work at, the larger university system that you're working in, potentially for your internship site. You're going to also develop contacts just by being in a certain community of psychologists. So there will be opportunities probably in your area for postdocs that you might want. And if you can demonstrate during internship that you're obviously qualified, a good person to work with, that you're dependable, you're going to have a good shot at getting one of those postdocs. So even though there's a lot of planning that can be involved, some of these things do come about organically, and it's good to think about being on internship and thinking about the next step. And it's not inappropriate, too, to ask about potential postdoctoral positions, even on your internship interviews, to start thinking about having some more continuity of training. Wow, okay, network. There's a lot of different ways that you can network. I think being here at SPA and other similar conferences is a great place to network. You're going to be exposed to people's research. Hopefully they're exposed to yours, especially if you are working in similar areas. You might be in a paper session with that person. You also have informal opportunities to talk with that person in kind of social settings. You can come up with after your symposia or after the symposia if you want to talk to Mark or Bob or somebody. That's but it's an opportunity to really connect with these people on a personal level, and that can go a long way. Other places are professional trainings. So a lot of us will probably attend some sort of one-day workshop, maybe a multi-day workshop in something that we're really interested in. The person presenting that and the people who are there also receiving that training are potential folks that you can work with. So keeping those in mind and really thinking about ways to sort of introduce yourself and get that ball rolling in those situations is helpful. Another sort of idea along the same lines is to join APA divisions and other professional societies. I think most of us probably are obviously SPA members, but a lot of us are also APA members of different specialty areas. And this can really provide an opportunity to email, to attend conferences, to be on discussion boards and things like that with people that you might be interested in working with. One other thing that I found as a graduate student that was kind of helpful in getting my name out there, getting my research out there, is to publish in newsletters. It's a little bit of work. It's not a peer-reviewed publication, so it's not quite at the same level. But at the same time, it actually gives you a pretty decent exposure within an organization that does similar work as you do. I mean, they don't always just want, at times they actually don't want only research-based newsletter submissions. They want things that are applied. A lot of the societies actually have the majority of people being clinicians. So emphasizing clinical skills that you're learning, how you're applying them, can really be a nice contribution to a newsletter. And it's an easy way to get something on your Vita. It's also a place that newsletter editors are generally very generous with graduate students. And if you say, I have an idea for an article, and present an abstract, and usually they say, great, as long as it's something that's decent. So that can be something as well. Use your professional network. So use your advisor's contacts. If you're close with faculty in your program that are also working in similar areas as you, they probably know people that run postdoctoral programs or involved with postdoctoral training programs, or potentially would take on a postdoc. A lot of postdocs are not always formal. They're not around every single year. So someone might actually create one or be willing to be a postdoctoral advisor for you if you can demonstrate that you'd be a good person to work with. So again, mentor professors in your department. Use your colleagues. A lot of us, myself, in a postdoctoral training program. If you have interests that are very similar to mine or someone else who's in postdoc right now, talk to that person about your potential fit with that position. Again, current postdocs. Okay. So one of the most difficult things, I think, for graduate students especially is to make first contact, especially if it's somebody you don't know right off the top of your head. It's not somebody who's at your university. You don't have a class with them that makes it easy to introduce yourself. So again, use your professional network. If it's someone that you and your mentor both know or have been introduced to, have your mentor make that first contact. Maybe they can bridge that for you. Send the person an email, say, I've got a student who's interested in your work. I'd like to let you know that they're out there. So that's that part. If the person, so usually what happens is that after this initial contact is made, it's really helpful for you to follow up with a brief email. And I say brief because most faculty and most very busy people get hundreds of emails a day. And if it's not brief, they will not read the first 3 sentences. They might skim, but they're not going to read it in detail. So the very first thing, you really want to talk very briefly about training goals. You want to demonstrate that there's some fit between yourself and this mentor. Include your CV, or maybe even an abbreviated CV that really highlights the fit and highlights the areas of research or clinical training that are consistent with this person. And potentially a publication as well. If you have something that's very clearly along the lines with this person, send that along. It demonstrates that you do understand there's a good fit. It shows that you've done something in this area, that you're not going to need to have your hand held if you go there. If the person does not respond, it's appropriate to potentially follow up by phone. Give them a couple weeks to respond, because sometimes emails get lost in the shuffle, obviously. But it is appropriate to potentially follow up by phone. Just say, hey, sent you an email, wanted to potentially make contact. It's not always the easiest thing to do to put yourself out there to a potential mentor, but usually they appreciate the contact. Be proactive. It's really easy to send emails or to potentially even before that try to rely on your mentor or your faculty advisor to make these contacts and hope that they will sort of take off on their own. They don't always do that. In fact, they rarely do that. It's going to show a lot to the potential mentor that you are interested in them by being proactive, by pursuing contact, by getting yourself out there with them. So you really do want to be proactive and take some steps to show that you're energetic and that you want to work with this person. Okay, so we're going to take a little different tack now and really talk about some pragmatic issues of finding positions. Like I said before, a lot of positions are not available every single year. A lot of positions, especially those that are grant funded, come and go. And so it's hard sometimes to find what's available. First thing to do, use your network again. Talk with your mentor about their colleagues that potentially have postdoctoral positions. Maybe somebody has an R01 under review that has a postdoc written in, and they're going to be looking for someone if that gets funded. So it's really good to start really getting out the word that you're looking for a postdoc in a certain area. Talk with your internship training director or supervisors on internship. A lot of them are friends with colleagues that run postdoctoral programs or that have postdocs themselves, and these might be ones that really are word-of-mouth type of programs or type of positions. So it's really helpful to say, I really want to stay in Boston, and I would like to work with a person who does forensic psychology. And they might be like, oh, okay, yeah, there's so-and-so that has a great training opportunity for you. A lot of internship programs, especially in larger metropolitan areas, will also have either a more informal or a very formal way of exposing interns to postdocs in the area. So I was at the University of Colorado School of Medicine in Denver, and we actually had a full-day postdoctoral symposium where every intern from all the internship training programs in the area came to this very large lecture hall, and we had about 25 postdoctoral advisors and mentors come and present 10 or 15 minutes on their position, what it was like, what they expected, and provided contact information. So for those folks who really wanted to stay in Denver, it was absolutely amazing to get within 7 or 8 hours basically anything that was available in the area. It was right there. I don't know if a lot of programs do this. I've heard that some do in larger areas. But a lot of them are less formal. Of course, internship training directors are going to have a bit of a bead on what is available because they've had interns and have transitioned into postdoc in their area. So they're going to have some idea about what's going on, even if there isn't this formalized of a process that I experienced. Wow, what a novel idea, right? Look on the internet. A lot of positions are posted, as you would imagine. One of the most helpful places that I have actually found has been APA division listservs and professional society listservs. And I would suggest actually signing up for these or even starting student memberships in different societies that you're interested in the year before you start an internship. They will post dozens and dozens of postdoctoral positions. And I still am actually on these listservs. They get posted every day. They're ones that I've never seen before, ones that are not on other sites that I currently pay attention to. So it is really a good way of really expanding the breadth of finding these sites. There's a lot of postdoctoral training programs that are now associated with APIC. It has been that way in the past, but it wasn't very important in the past to be an APIC site. It's becoming more important because they have developed a more of a match type system. It's not actually a match, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So the APIC website does list all of their affiliated postdoctoral programs, and you'll be familiar with that site because you'll have gone through internship. Another place that's been really important has been APA's Site Careers website, which is jobs.sitecareers.com. This is a place where postdoctoral sites have to pay to advertise, but you're going to get a lot of postings, and you're going to get ones that are all psychology. So you know you're going to get what you're looking for. I will say, though, that of the 6 postdoctoral programs that I applied for, only 2 ever appeared on Site Careers. So Like it's not going to catch everything. Most programs actually keep very good up-to-date websites, especially some of the larger training programs that are consistently available every year. They're going to have a lot of information about what they expect, what their application process is, what you can expect to be like in those situations. So peruse those. Another place is if you're looking for T32 programs or other NIH-funded ones, is to look at NIH institutes. I'm hoping this is going to work. Okay, it worked. So NIDA, if anyone's interested in drug abuse, addiction research, anything that's actually within that umbrella, NIDA actually provides a website that lists every single postdoctoral training program that NIDA funds. And other institutes are similar to this. I have not been able to locate one through NIMH, but I have heard that it exists. So don't be deterred if you're looking for potentially an NIMH-funded program. And you can see here that it lists contact information, who the program director is, if they have a website, and also a description of essentially what their grant proposal said they're going to do for their training program. So this can be a very good place to start thinking, especially for the research-oriented folks in the room. I think this goes back to the presentation. If I click out of it, just waiting. There's a lot of different ways to apply for postdocs, and it's a non-linear process. But I will say it's getting better. Like I said, APIC is actually instituted, I think this was the first year, where they had a universal notification date, which happened just a couple of days ago. So if you saw a lot of very relieved interns that potentially got postdocs on the 14th, that might be why. And they have an interesting situation where they have an option for reciprocal offer. So postdoctoral training sites that are not participating as APIC sites in this universal notification date, if you receive an offer from one of them prior to the notification date and they give you some deadline, APIC will essentially sort of mediate the process of having APIC sites make you an offer if you're the top candidate, or asking your other site that has offered you to wait until the 14th so that APIC sites can potentially offer you a position as well. So they're trying to make it a little bit less crazy, a little bit less of a horse race. When I was going through this last year, I had the first place that made me an offer gave me a very tight deadline because they wanted to get it locked up. They didn't want to have to interview more candidates if they got the person they wanted, and you really you feel very pressured to make a decision. So hopefully that's going to be a little bit better in the future. If anybody is a clinical neuropsychologist, the American, the Association of Programs in Clinical Neuropsychology, Psychology Programs in Neuropsychology, has more of a match process. They actually have a formalized situation. So who knows, we might actually be moving in that direction with postdocs. It's not there yet. It doesn't look like it's in the very near future, but it could. As I've alluded to a number of times, postdoctoral positions are ephemeral. They will come and go. You'll see one year, the next year it's not available. Even programs that have been funded for 15 or 20 years could have a lapse in funding or not be refunded for a 5-year continuation. So you really do have to really pay attention to what's going on, start early, monitor what's happening, and be ready to be flexible, because there will be positions that come about out of nowhere. So be ready to do that. And one of the ways that you can sort of determine postdocs is to follow the money. So that leads me into talking about organization and structure of postdocs. Many of them are grant funded, particularly research positions. As I mentioned already, a lot of them are T32 training programs, which are NIMH, NIA, or NIDA, NIAAA, things like that actually have postdoctoral training programs. The VA system has what's called the MyRecs, and they are the VA's postdoctoral training programs. Each region has a MyRec. I believe there's 8, maybe even 10 different MyRecs, and they all have a specific research focus. Another potential situation is to find project-funded research and clinical positions. So a lot of times these are R01s. In my center, we have a number of R01s that have postdoctoral funded clinical positions, where you're actually an interventionist on one of our randomized controlled trials. And you, as I was saying before, thinking about what it would mean for your experience as a postdoc to potentially only learn to be efficacious or only learn to have adherence to a protocol-driven treatment might not be what you're looking for, but that is a potential that's out there. Clinical training positions, some things to think about and ask about is whether or not they're service-based, whether or not your salary or the way that they actually pay you is dependent upon how many clients you see. In those positions, you will probably experience some pressure to have a full caseload very quickly to maintain that caseload. There might actually be requirements for hours, and if you have clients that cancel and they couldn't bill for it, you might have to pick up more hours to essentially make sure that you're meeting your minimum requirements. And that can be a different type of experience from a position where you're here, we appreciate that you're providing services to X number of clients, but it's really a training focus, and they understand that that's the main thing. So really getting a sense of that on your interviews is going to be important. Along the lines of that, similarly is supervision. How much supervision is provided? What's the quality of that supervision? And how seriously do they take training? Or are you just there to fill a seat and bill for the clients that you see? Like I said, fund yourself. There's a lot of research-related ones from from NIH. NRSAs are postdoctoral research positions. They're postdoctoral research grants that you can get as an individual. The T32 program that I am in is actually a National Research Service position as well, but it's actually given to the institution, not the individual. So I did not actually apply for anything to get that. National Science Foundation is potential for research as well. And as I mentioned, there's a number of kind of grant organizations that could potentially fund you as well. Throughout this whole process, I'm going to reflect a little bit on my own experience. I don't think anyone actually prepares graduate students in psychology for how difficult it is emotionally to transition out of your training program, leave your friends behind, in many cases flying across the country. And it's a stressful situation, even after you've gotten an internship, to actually move, get started, and it moves very quickly. And postdoc is similar. So I want to just say, be kind to yourself during the process, do things that are fun, do things that you enjoy, exercise, eat right, get some sleep, all that kind of stuff. It is actually very, very important. And I unfortunately am learning that as I get further along rather than on the front end. It would have been very helpful to understand during internship when there's a lot of demands and a lot of things pulling you in a lot of directions. So yeah, that's kind of the nutshell about postdocs. Here's my email if anyone has questions for me specifically, and I want to open up actually for questions for everybody at this point. So I'll moderate, but questions for any of our panelists today. Yeah.
You mean your clinical experience? Again, I think actually, is it required?
I think the minimum requirement is 500 face-to-face hours. Then there's obviously a supervision minimum, probably too. It's 100 to 200 hours.
Well, like I would say, I want to have evidence that you have a lot of training, setting. So the minimum is not in the right places. It's better. Telling me that you've done 500 evaluations. That's possible. Yeah.
Okay. If anybody has other questions, feel free to come catch us. That was helpful. Why didn't you tell me this? Yeah. There was a lot of students that emailed. I think there's yeah.
Postdocs.
Yep.
It turned out good.
Yeah. I'm very happy with it. Thanks for being a part of it. Appreciate it.